Laurel, Maryland, a suburban community between Baltimore and Washington, D.C.
Laurel still has a small town, kind of a Mayberry-like feel to it. Everybody knows everybody.
Ann Donnelly, who is a private care nurse, is reporting for duty. Her charge is a 26-year-old Jasmine Gilbert, who suffers from cerebral palsy.
Hello? Ann? Hello?
This is extremely unusual. She expects to be greeted, as she usually is. Oh, good morning, Ann. But the place is quiet, very, very quiet.
Hello? Hello?
She goes to the back door, the patio door.
Tina?
The door's unlocked.
James? Tina?
And no one answers her calls.
James?
And then she was the one that found the bodies and found this horrific, bloody scene in the bedroom.
When first responders arrive, they walk into a monstrous scene. Jasmine's mother, 45-year-old Tina Towler, is dead on the bedroom floor, along with 42-year-old James Ferguson.
The bedroom is chaos, and back tucked off beyond the bed is another bed with covers.
And that's when they discovered Jasmine Gilbert. I spent my career closing murder cases. But I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
My name is Joseph Bellino. I've been with the Prince George's County Police since 2007. This was my second homicide case. The first case I got was, we closed it within 48 hours. It wasn't a difficult case. So I told my sergeant that I wanted more of a challenge. He said, be careful for what you ask for. It was a nice spring morning. I was driving into work. It was just after 8 in the morning.
Dispatch to Detective Bellino.
Go for Bellino.
And they called me and said that there had been 2 bodies found at a residence in Laurel. When it comes to investigating a case, I want to live and die by my own hand. So for me, getting to the scene of the crime and to be involved in the decisions is essential.
Detective Bellino is informed there is the 26-year-old cerebral palsy patient who is apparently unharmed. There's no visible injury to this girl, but they still had her removed to be medically examined. But her mother, Tina Towler, and her boyfriend, James Ferguson, are dead on the bedroom floor.
Tina and I were best friends. My husband and I end up moving into the same neighborhood, and that's probably how our friendship evolved. We would bring the kids together, do cookies for Christmas time. I taught her how to drive a stick shift.
James had a large and very dynamic family. Everybody described somebody who was just fun to be around, just a good person to hang out with, somebody who would always welcome you into his apartment at any time.
When you initially enter the apartment, there was a living space, dining room table, kitchen. There was several beer cans that were on the coffee table. Outside of that, everything appeared in order. There was no signs of a struggle. Once you got inside the bedroom, you could see that a serious altercation had occurred there.
This is a very violent crime scene, blood spatter on the walls, on the floor, a great deal of blood every place.
I noticed the door to the bedroom was damaged where the lock would be.
So the thought was that somebody kicked in that bedroom door. We could see blood spatter on the ceiling and just the brutal nature of the attacks on both of them.
There were pots, there were pans, there was a vase that was shattered, broken on either sides of the bedroom.
Must have been one hell of a struggle.
And then there were these two bodies. Tina was found at the foot of the bed. She had multiple stab wounds to her back, the lower back area. Her face had been heavily beaten.
And he is immediately struck by something very unusual.
She had the imprint of what looked like EVE on her forehead.
One of the first images I remember that will never leave my mind is looking at Tina's body and to see the letters imprinted on her forehead.
That's a critical piece of evidence. Now, what does that mean? Next to her on the floor, flat on his back, is James Ferguson.
He had multiple sharp force injuries, stab wounds to his hands and chest, upper body.
He's also wearing a leather pouch on his belt, the type that's worn that contains a knife. The pouch is empty and the snap closure is open. So did that knife somehow become involved in this offense?
When you have a boyfriend, girlfriend dead in a home or in a residence, I mean, you always have to examine whether it's a possibility it's a murder-suicide.
But Bellino looks at these bodies and notices immediately that can't be true. Mr. Ferguson has extreme blunt trauma injuries to his face. He didn't beat himself up. Tina Tyler has the same thing. They were both attacked by someone else. This is a double homicide.
I've never seen a case like that. This was a horrible, horrible killing.
When we continued to look through the apartment in a bathroom that was just adjacent to their bedroom, there was a knife that was unfolded that was in the sink next to a bar of soap. We also found a towel nearby.
That knife came from the sheath that's carried on Mr. Ferguson's waist. Did he pull that knife to try to defend himself and it was taken away from him and then used against him? It's likely that's true.
The problem is that in any bathroom, and in this one, there's soap, there's water, and there is a way for that evidence to then be disinfected, cleaned, and then sent down the drain and destroyed.
There is nothing apparently missing, no ransacking in the other rooms, no open drawers, no search through purses, none of that. The purpose of this event is murder, nothing else.
The victims, 45-year-old Tina Tyler and her boyfriend, 42-year-old James Ferguson, found beaten and stabbed to death in the bedroom of their apartment in Laurel. Police say they found no sign of forced entry.
The victim's daughter wasn't hurt. She is a witness to the crime, and she is now in the care and custody of the state of Maryland.
We hear about murders all the time, you know, in the state and in the region. The fact that her daughter was there and witnessed it and, you know, in her physical condition and really put a tragic, sad twist on the whole thing.
When Jasmine was born, she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and given 3 months to live. Obviously, at the time of this double homicide, she had outlived those expectations.
Unfortunately, Jasmine has a very severe form of cerebral palsy. Ultimately, it results in a person who is incapable of walking, standing, sitting. It is a terrible disease. Nurse Ann Donnelly is there at the hospital and says she's fine, she's not hurt.
Ann Donnelly and the other nurses were a select group of women who had cared for her for a long period of time.
So they had an afternoon nurse until 9:30 or so at night. And then the first thing the next morning, they would have a day nurse that would come in. So between 9:30 p.m. and 8 a.m. is the time this crime occurred.
I can't imagine what she went through.
Definitely, the trauma doesn't just stop, with the witnessing of the horrific event, not, knowing why you're being taken out of your home and then put in this hospital, not knowing who these doctors and nurses are. It could cause even more stress for her.
He asked, do you think she can understand me if I ask her something? Donnelly says, I don't think so. You can try. This child is nonverbal.
But she connects in other ways.
Yes.
She knows voices, so if you go in and you say, hey, Jazzy, Jazz, how you doing? And she would smile and she would start to laugh. She just loved music. Tina sang to her a lot, so she liked for her mom to sing to her.
Because she was in that room and it was evident that this all took place right there in front of her. So what did she know? Our goal was to try to figure out, what did she see?
Jazzy, honey, it's Ann. You're in the hospital. Jazzy, honey.
It was always in the back of my mind, how had this affected her? Would she be able to communicate?
The only person who saw or potentially saw anything is Jasmine. So it's critical that Bellino makes every attempt to try to get information from her. She is the ultimate loose end.
Tina Towler and her boyfriend, James Ferguson, were found beaten and stabbed to death in their bedroom after a home nurse arrived to care for Towler's severely disabled daughter, Jasmine.
The daughter was in a location where it would be reasonable that she would have been either had witnessed the homicide or a portion thereof.
We know Jasmine was in the room when both James and Tina were murdered, and our goal was to try to figure out, what did she see? What does she know about it?
Jazzy, honey, you're safe now, okay? This nice man wants to ask you some questions.
But does she understand what she's being asked? An eyewitness certainly can be extremely useful. As a cerebral palsy patient in terrible physical condition, how useful that may be remains to be seen.
Jazzy, we have to know what happened last night. Did you see who hurt your mom?
It's disappointing to know that somebody who was present during the crime is not going to be able to give us information that we really need.
I'm sorry. I just don't think she understands.
Let's just let her rest for now. I can come back later.
The fact that Jasmine was left alive was an indicator to us that the individual who killed James and Tina knew of her condition and did not kill her because they knew that she would never be able to tell. Obviously, we had a large contingent of officers who assisted with the neighborhood canvass to knock on doors, speak to all the neighbors. And from speaking to witnesses in the case, we learned that Jay Towler is Tina Towler's ex-husband.
The officer says he spoke to a neighbor who noticed that the ex-husband was standing in the crowd outside the crime scene. Now, that's kind of odd. Why did you not contact the police if you're concerned about the victim? So Jay Tyler is invited to come for an interview at the police department.
Anytime you have a crime like this, you have a woman who's murdered, you have her boyfriend who's murdered, there's the potential that this could be some type of love triangle gone bad.
One of Jasmine's nurses called and said that Mr. James and Miss Tina are unresponsive. So I told my boss I had to go, and I left. You couldn't get close. They had it all blocked off. Just a lot of people around, cameras, TV cameras, and so forth. Policeman said, well, we're gonna take you down and have some questions for you down at the police station.
When the crime is wide open, everybody's a suspect. I certainly interviewed him that way.
So you were not in the apartment last night? No, I already told you.
I told the detective I wouldn't do nothing like that. It was like Mike Tyson hit me in my stomach. I was crushed.
He seemed to be truly emotional and distraught over her death and came off as somebody who wanted to be helpful in any way he could.
I met Tina on the subway, and she was struggling with Jasmine. I gave her a hand with Jasmine, and we kind of talked a little bit and got her number and so forth, and eventually we got together. Got married later on.
Me, Tina, Jay, and my husband, we started taking vacations together, so we did cruises. The families kind of just kind of merged.
So he asked Tyler to explain to him what caused their marriage to break up.
But we had a child, Michael. Michael, at 2 years old, he was diagnosed with hepatoblastoma, and he passed at 3 years old.
And the sudden death of their child, it kind of changed the trajectory of her life and their marriage.
Mr. Tyler explained that she was overwhelmed emotionally, and they drifted apart as a result.
Maybe we couldn't live together. That didn't mean we didn't care for each other. I always would check on her and Jasmine. You know what I mean?
He had no hatred toward her. They just didn't want to be married anymore, and they got unmarried. Well, we have a second victim in this house. What do you say about Mr. Ferguson?
James, he seemed like a decent person. We got along real well. And, you know, he would call me up, Jay, come on over. I got dinner. Come on over.
So there was no animosity toward his ex-wife or toward James Ferguson. We still want to alibi him. Where were you on the night this occurred?
I was at my regular job. I went to fix the bathroom up in Gettysburg, and I was home after that.
He told me that he'd gotten home that evening, probably 9, 10 o'clock. He stayed there at the apartment, watched some TV, and went to sleep.
You know, I didn't have no girlfriend at the house and nothing like that. And so I'm thinking now, like, wow, this isn't a good alibi. But it's the truth.
When I asked him for somebody who could verify his whereabouts, he said that Thurston Yerby, his roommate, would be able to verify that he, in fact, was at home that evening.
Mr. Yerby, I'm calling in reference to Jay Towler. Is there any way you can come down to the station this afternoon?
When I initially spoke with Thurston, he had left the Laurel area and had gone to North Carolina with his girlfriend to visit some of her relatives.
And he confirms Mr. Tyler's alibi, that he was home that night. He remembers him coming home and he never left. And Thurston Yerby further said he'd be happy to come down and make a written statement to that effect when he returns from his trip.
Just an over-the-phone confirmation isn't enough. Detective Bellino's thorough on what he does. He needs to have you in. He needs to have you interviewed.
Hey, the ME called. They're ready for you.
You know, I always say, I've seen enough death. I'll be fine if I don't see any more. There's no way for us to escape that real intimate exposure to death that you have when you're in an autopsy. It's important that you or somebody you work with goes.
So, what'd you find?
Well, they both have alcohol in their systems. I haven't seen anything this brutal in a long time.
James Ferguson's cause of death were blunt force injuries and multiple stabbing/cutting wounds. I think he had somewhere near 15.
The coroner also told Bellino that the knife found in the bathroom sink, the folding knife from the sheath or pouch, on James Ferguson's waist is consistent with all of the wounds and therefore is likely the murder weapon.
Tina Towler's cause of death was multiple injuries, mainly because there were so many different things that were done to her. Blunt force injuries, stabbing and cutting wounds, and then the attempted asphyxiation as well.
It takes a certain type of, individual to strangle somebody, to have that type of close, intimate contact.
This level of violence is not exhibited by a stranger versus another stranger. This is someone who knows them, who hates them. But who's the intended victim here?
What do you make of that?
There is a word on the forehead of the victim, EVE.
It was an indicator to us that extreme force had been used to kill her.
Wait a minute. I know what this is.
The victims, 45-year-old Tina Lynn Towler and 42-year-old James Bell Ferguson, lived together in the apartment. Detectives recovered multiple murder weapons from the scene, including household items and a knife. The exact motive for these murders is still unknown.
When Bellino meets with a medical examiner, he sees a mark on the forehead that is actually a word. It's EVE.
And we were able to determine that those letters were on a flashlight that was broken and found on the scene of the crime.
And it was an ever-ready flashlight. She was so savagely beaten with that flashlight that part of the name of the light was transferred to her forehead.
The fact that she had all these blunt force injuries to her face, to me, it was overkill. Whatever happened to her was excessive.
What it shows is that the focus of the assault was probably primarily on Tina Towler.
What was really striking about this particular case is the multiple instruments that were used. The knife, the flashlight, the vase, the frying pan, the pots. This is somebody who is clearly acting in rage at that point. He's determined to not just kill them, but seriously kill them.
At that point, there wasn't any one piece of evidence that gave us a solid lead that would clearly identify who was responsible for this.
There's always dead ends in murder cases, and people think that's frustrating, but by the same token, you're eliminating what didn't happen. It allows you to focus on what did happen.
At that point, the only eyewitness was Tina's adult daughter, Jasmine.
Early on, I was informed that Jasmine was non-communicative, but I started to explore the possibility that there are other individuals who don't speak traditionally as we do, but are able to communicate in other ways.
Bellino did a lot of research before he attempted to contact Jasmine again. He looked at medical research, he talked to a team of people who are familiar with this disease. It's still clear to Bellino this is a nearly impossible task, but he's willing to attempt it because he doesn't have another option at the moment.
I initially thought that there was a possibility that, we could get some type of nonverbal yes or no response.
At that point, she was at a home. It wasn't quite a nursing home, but they took care of adults with various disabilities.
Last week in the river. Full report coming up later. The benefits of laughter. It's no secret that laughter makes you...
Hi, Jasmine. I'm Detective Bellino.
She smiled. She gave signs of recognition to the nurses when they entered the room, and I attempted to talk to her.
So somebody was in your room that night. Somebody hurt your mom and James real bad. I think you saw what happened.
I looked at her eyes. I looked at her hands, her head, to just see if I could in any way get her to respond or acknowledge that she understood the information I was trying to relay to her.
Do you know who was in your room that night?
Jasmine, do you know who killed your mom? Jasmine.
From everything that I could gather, she was not understanding any of the information I was attempting to present to her.
Thank you, Jasmine.
There was no indication that she had any idea what he was talking about. Bellino was forced to reach the conclusion that he no longer had an eyewitness. Jasmine was incapable of providing him with any information whatsoever. So the case proceeds as if she wasn't even in the room. We need a fresh look at this. Forget what's happened so far and start over.
When your case kind of reaches an impasse, a lot of times detectives will go back out and recanvass the area, and not just for evidence, but also knocking on doors to see who might have seen or heard anything.
You don't always find everybody the first time. You contact every door again, see what happens.
Is this about the murders the other night?
I spoke with a resident of the building who was able to give me some information about the night that James and Tina were murdered.
And suddenly, a second canvas has produced potentially a very valuable witness. She says that when she comes home from work the night of the murders, it was almost 11 o'clock at night.
She said that there was a large white SUV that was outside the victim's apartment. She hadn't seen it there before, and there was a male sitting behind the wheel with a baseball cap on, smoking a cigarette.
He's within the time frame of when the murders occurred, whoever he may be. So what is he doing? Waiting for people to go to bed so he can kill them? We don't know.
Thanks for your time. That's all we need.
We just thought it was unusual and suspicious.
Bellino's next move is to check in with the forensics team.
DNA evidence was vital. It's essential in us being able to identify the killer.
Found some things you might be interested in.
And one thing that's of particular interest is a garbage can found in Tina's kitchen.
There were several beer cans inside that trash can. And then underneath what looked like a large white disposable cloth, it turned out to be like a nurse's smock.
That's the evening nurse throwing it away when she left at 9:30.
Those beer cans that were on top of the smock were placed there after she had left. Some of the beer cans were compared and determined to have the DNA of James Ferguson, but there were other cans that had the DNA of an unknown individual.
It's important that we recover DNA from everybody involved or potentially involved in this crime. Jay Tyler has asked for a DNA sample, which he freely offers.
I knew my DNA and stuff was there because I'm there every day checking on them, but I give it to you anyway. I mean, I don't have nothing to hide.
So he provided a DNA sample. The one last thing that we had to do to truly eliminate him was to interview an alibi witness. That person was Thurston Yerby.
Thanks for coming in, Mr.
So Thurston Yerby drove to the police station, came and met with me. He was an electrician who worked with Jay Towler. Because of their work together in home remodeling, they decided to get an apartment together.
And he confirms Mr. Towler's alibi. He remembers him coming home and he never left.
Do you mind if we get a DNA sample?
I asked Thurston if he was willing to submit a sample of DNA for the purpose of elimination. I wasn't even certain that I was gonna take it because he's just an alibi witness, but I wanted to see his response.
It's not gonna be a problem, is it?
You're gonna have to talk to my lawyer about that.
When a witness tells you they're not willing to give a DNA sample, it raises red flags.
Bellino knows this is something to pay attention to because he's reacting. The hair is standing up on the back of his neck.
He started to get uncomfortable, and I could tell he was nervous.
Is there any reason for your DNA or fingerprints to be inside Ms. Towler's apartment?
Nope.
Want one?
So Bellino uses a standard technique. He offers him a bottle of water. He takes a drink. If he leaves that behind, it's abandoned property, and they can test it for DNA and use it in court.
You mind?
Yeah, why don't we go outside?
When Yerby leaves, he takes that bottle with him, puts the cap on it, and sticks it in his pocket.
I had never seen that, where a suspect understands and knows that they may be leaving DNA behind, and then carries their trash in their pocket outside. While we were outside, I continued to converse with him.
He said Jay Towler was a contractor, and there were occasions where he would hire James Ferguson as well as Thurston Yerby to do some work for him in his contracting business.
So Thurston knew and was friendly with at least one, if not both of the victims.
So you knew Tina and James through your roommate, Jay, but you hadn't been in the apartment recently?
That's right.
And I'm watching him smoke this cigarette all the way down to the last bit of tobacco.
Bellino is anxious to get his hands on the cigarette butt.
He then stuck the butt in his pocket. And I thought that this is very unusual.
He's leaving no trail behind him. He's been coached by someone on how DNA can be obtained, and he makes certain that the two objects that contain it, he's taking with him. That makes Thurston Yerby a prime suspect. But there's not enough there to lock him up. Not yet. So now it's a hurry-up mode. Now the chase begins. They've got to get to people before Yerby does.
Detective Bellino starts having people look into the background of Mr. Yerby and people that knew him.
Could tell he likes to party.
I don't know. Moody, I guess.
You guys talking about that murder?
Why do you ask?
Because I'm pretty sure he had a thing with that dead lady.
What?
We came across and spoke with another witness who suspected that Thurston had had an affair with Tina. They had gone to a hotel room several months prior and had seen Thurston in a hotel room with Tina Towler in bed under the sheets.
And her boyfriend, James Ferguson, didn't know. Well, now, isn't that interesting? So this is certainly something Bellino has not heard. That Tina Towler now has a perchance romantic involvement with Thurston Yerby.
It was a big break in the case. The fact that someone we were just speaking with as an alibi witness, it was now being uncovered, was in fact having a sexual relationship or an affair with our victim. So that was huge. Sam said that on the night of James and Tina's murder, Thurston Yerby was at a party. He was intoxicated.
Thurston Yerby was so out of control, drinking alcohol and using cocaine, that he was groping all the women at this party and got thrown out.
What's the matter with you, man?
Who's this?
Hey, man, go home and sleep it off.
The night's still young. I'm going to get laid.
Maybe he's talking about going to see Tina. Not only is he drunk, his system is full of cocaine, which makes him superhuman in terms of strength and in terms of volatility.
Do you remember what kind of car Mr. Yerby was driving that night?
Yeah, it was a big SUV.
Color?
White.
You're positive?
100%.
Basically, you can hear the ding, ding, ding. Everything's fitting together. So Detective Bellino pretty easily learns that Mr. Yerby's girlfriend owns a white SUV, and Mr. Yerby drove that SUV frequently.
So it's all starting to come together, but Bellino still does not have Yerby's DNA. And he can't get it without his consent at this point. But he does have his fingerprints because he has a record.
Detective Bellino looks into the evidence that was collected back in the house and determines that the beer can that came out of the trash can has fingerprints on it.
What do you know?
The fingerprints recovered from the beer cans were identified to be those of Thurston Lamont Yerby. Proves that he was inside the residence after the time that the nurses had left. While he had told us and told me he had never been inside the residence, that was a lie. And that he was the last person who was inside that home before the victims were murdered.
Now, we can't ask the judge to order him to give his DNA. The judge says, you're hereby commanded to get the DNA sample of Mr. Thurston Yerby.
Or as they say in Ireland, you're DNA doesn't lie. DNA isn't influenced, and DNA isn't interpreted. It either matches or it doesn't. And if it matches, Mr. Yerby has something he cannot explain. After a protracted investigation of the deaths of James Ferguson and Tina Towler, Detective Bellino has arrived at a prime suspect, Thurston Yerby.
We were able to get a warrant to obtain a sample of his DNA to compare it against evidence in the scene of the crime.
Go down to see right here, sir. All right, open your mouth, please, sir.
What if I don't?
Mr. Yerby is cocky and confrontive. It's like he's saying, catch me if you can. He believes he's smarter than the police, and he comes across that way.
Ready?
Yes, sir, you're free to go. Don't leave town.
Bellino releases him pending the results of the DNA examination.
14 out of 15 alleles. It's about as clear as it gets.
So this is a match?
It's a match.
Thurston Yerby's DNA is on the bloody towel in the bathroom, along with both victims' DNAs. His DNA is on the murder weapon, and his DNA is on the beer can in the trash can. Thurston can deny all he wants. The evidence is overwhelming, and it says otherwise.
He was the culprit involved in these murders.
When they finally have their warrant in hand, Yerby understands he's being looked for.
He's on the move.
He knows they'll find that evidence, particularly after they took that DNA sample. So he's a little elusive at the moment.
We need to get him in custody. We didn't want a high-speed chase or some type of incident that would further danger the community.
We just pulled into the elementary school.
They find him at the school where his girlfriend works.
It's definitely a dangerous situation. He is bringing himself and stopping at a location that has large amounts of small children.
If he moves, they're going to follow him away from the school, stop him, and arrest him. But they want those kids out of there and gone before they try anything. And they do. They wait, and the kids come out. The kids leave the area. He's still sitting there. I don't know what he's doing there, but that's where he is.
Let's move.
Driver, show me your hands. Put your hands out. Step out and face away from me. Walk backwards. Stop. Lay down on your face.
Thurston Yerby, you have the right to remain silent. If you give up the right to remain silent...
We were fortunately able to get him in custody without anyone really coming too aware of it.
But he says, in his same cocky, I know everything manner, you got one chance to convict me, and if you don't, I'm walking.
The suspect wanted for the murders of a couple in Laurel is now in police custody. The Prince George's County Police Department obtained a warrant on Wednesday charging 47-year-old Thurston Lamont Yerby of Laurel with first-degree murder.
There is a sense of satisfaction when you solve a case like this, and the detectives put a lot of hard work into this case, and it's very satisfying.
What I believe happened that night is Thurston Yerby wanted to have sex that evening.
He had had a relationship with Tina Tower at one point before, and he went by the house because he had been there before and he knew where it was.
What are you doing here?
Hey, baby.
Hey, man. Long time no see.
Hey, what's going on, bro?
Huh, nothing. Come on in, have a drink.
And it seems that Tina Tower and James Ferguson may have let him come in.
I believe that he drank beer with James Ferguson and played it off as if he was there just to socially spend time and hang out.
It looks like at some point when James Ferguson went into the bathroom that Thurston Yerby attempted to take advantage of that time.
James Ferguson probably pulled out the knife that he carries on his belt, and Thurston Yerby, who was stronger and bigger than James Ferguson, disarmed him, killed James Ferguson, stabbed him to death, and then realized that he could not leave a witness. So after killing James, he decided to kill Tina.
In my opinion, Thurston Yerby pulled that sheet over Jasmine's head so she couldn't see what was happening.
Thurston Yerby went to the bathroom, cleaned himself up, cleaned off as much of the blood as he could, and decided not to kill Jasmine because he knew that Jasmine was never going to be able to communicate. Got in his vehicle and left.
So I argue very passionately to the jury, because I still believe to this day, it was premeditated. But at some point, as he's beating them, stabbing them, choking them, at some point he's aware he's killing them. And he goes into the kitchen to get pans and pots. He's going to get more weapons and coming back. Why is he getting these weapons? To kill them. That's premeditation.
What went wrong in that apartment to go from drinking beer to stabbing and bludgeoning everyone to death? We're not going to know that. It's speculation. Mr. Yerby isn't going to tell us.
Thurston Yerby was convicted on 2 counts of second-degree murder. He's serving 2 30-year sentences consecutively at Jessup Correctional Institution.
My brother will look out and help anyone. As far as I know, he's very respectful. And he's going to be truly, gratefully missed.
I want to remember Tina as the person that I knew her as. The sweet, bubbly, loving, caring, giving person.
I know that Tina wanted to be with Michael, so hopefully that's where she got to, because that was her heart.
So there are many tragedies to this case. Probably one of the things that lingers with me so many years later not just the savagery what happened to Tina and James, but what Jasmine must have been feeling, experiencing.
She became a ward of the state and wound up in a state facility hospital.
I hope that Jasmine can find peace and have an understanding of the lengths that we went to get justice for her and for her mother.
Detective Bellino is representative of every homicide detective in this country. People who do the work because they find it to be important. You do it for the victims and their families because nobody else is ever going to.
Entire vile conspiracy. He explained that a year prior to the murder, Patricia complained to her sister Sheila about Fred being a tightwad and asked her to find someone to eliminate him. Sheila immediately turned to Leroy, brokering a deal where Patricia would pay him $30,000 from the impending insurance money. On the night of April 24th, 1991, Leroy drove up to North Carolina with a .22 caliber weapon, disabled his own vehicle by removing the ignition coil, and called the Brown residence claiming to be stranded. Fred, being the inherently compassionate man that he was, drove out into the dark night to help a stranger in need. While Fred was looking under the hood, Leroy pulled the gun and coldly informed Fred that his own wife wanted him dead. Fred begged for his life and tried to run, but Leroy shot him in the back, stepped on his spine, and delivered 2 fatal shots to the head before stealing his wallet to stage a robbery and throwing the gun into the Coosa River. And the most pathetic detail of this entire miserable plot is that Patricia never even paid Leroy the $30,000 she promised him. I tell you, there is absolutely no honor among thieves, and certainly none among cowardly murderers. Armed with phone records that perfectly corroborated Leroy's timeline, investigators finally arrested both sisters. Sheila instantly turned on her sister to save herself, taking the stand for the prosecution. During the trial in May of 1995, the courtroom fell dead silent as Leroy calmly reenacted the execution. Patricia's defense attorneys desperately tried to argue that Leroy was trying to blackmail Fred over a fabricated affair, but the jury easily saw through the pathetic lies. After 2 days of deliberation, Patricia Brown was rightfully found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, where she died less than 7 years later in 2002. Leroy and Sheila both pled guilty to second-degree murder and each received 50-year sentences. Behind bars, 3 lives locked away and 1 decent man executed in the dirt, all over a flock of screaming birds and some real estate debt. Conscience is usually a quiet voice, but in the dark and empty soul of Patricia Brown, it was entirely silent. A tragic mirage, the cost of boundless ambition and the shattering of a family, as observers deeply rooted in the cultural fabric of Germany. We are raised with profound appreciation for Masshalten, the wisdom of moderation and balance, and Zusammenhalt, the unbreakable bond of community, solidarity. We are taught that true security does not stem from boundless wealth, but from a harmonious life, grounded in reality, mutual support, and a quiet gratitude for what we have. Yet, when we cast our journalistic gaze across the ocean to a quiet neighborhood in Arlington, Texas, we bear witness to a chilling narrative. It is a profound tragedy that unfolded on June 10, 2012, serving as a dark cautionary tale about the absolute collapse of reason when the human spirit is consumed by greed and unchecked desperation. This is the story of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee, a devoted elderly couple who crossed continents in the year 2000 to build a new life in the United States. It is also the story of how their relentless pursuit of prosperity became the very instrument of their demise, orchestrated by those they trusted most. The burden of an unforgiving dream. Long Nguyen and Hong Lee were the embodiment of resilience. Fleeing the shadows of their homeland's turbulent past, they arrived in Texas with their children, hoping to forge a legacy. In the early years, their diligence bore fruit. They established a commercial sewing business, working tirelessly and eventually securing lucrative contracts with major corporations. They were beloved figures in their community, known for their warmth, generosity, and quiet dedication. However, the foundation of the success was fragile. By the year 2011, the tides of fortune had turned. Major contracts were lost, and the family business began to hemorrhage money. In German culture, times of crisis often draw communities closer together, relying on a robust social safety net and a collective spirit of endurance. But for Long and Hong, the terror of financial ruin induced a profound psychological paralysis. Stripped of their security, they did not turn to rational restructuring or community aid. Instead, paralyzed by the fear of losing their hard-won status, they regressed into the ancient mysticisms of their heritage. They became convinced that a spiritual curse was the root of their misfortune. This fatal departure from rational thought left them deeply vulnerable to exploitation. The psychology of exploitation, the false savior, desperation is a fertile breeding ground for predators. Through a local newspaper, the couple, guided by their son-in-law, 38-year-old Chow Tran, found a spiritual advisor based 250 miles away in Houston. Her name was Daphne Wright. To understand Daphne Wright is to look into the abyss of pathological greed. She presented herself as a savior capable of lifting curses and restoring prosperity. In reality, she was a master manipulator who weaponized faith. Psychologically, Daphne operated with a chilling detachment from human suffering. She recognized a profound existential terror gripping Long and Hong and capitalized on it, charging exorbitant fees for hollow rituals. Over time, the family's debt to the spiritual advisor swelled to an astonishing sum, estimated between $250,000 and $280,000. Daphne established a psychological monopoly over the family, convincing them that failure to pay would result in catastrophic spiritual and physical ruin. When the couple inevitably could not pay, Daphne's illusion of spiritual guidance evaporated, revealing a ruthless extortionist who demanded ultimate repayment, the ultimate betrayal, an inside job. The most devastating element of this tragedy is not the cruelty of a stranger, but the betrayal from within. Chow Tran, the son-in-law who served as the face of the family business, emerged as the dark architect of his own family's destruction. Financial records later revealed that Chow and his wife were the beneficiaries of life insurance, policies totaling $850,000. Faced with mounting debts and the collapse of his business, Chow's internal moral compass shattered completely. The psychological leap required to sacrifice one's own family for monetary gain is incomprehensible to those who value the sanctity of kinship. Yet, for Chow, the elderly couple ceased to be beloved parents. They became disposable assets. In a staggering display of manipulation, Chow claimed his mother-in-law willingly offered herself as a sacrifice to appease their debts. This absurd assertion highlights the depths of Chow's self-deception and moral bankruptcy. He provided Daphne Wright with the keys to his in-laws' apartment, actively participating in a plot to violently end their lives to collect a massive financial windfall. The execution and the innocent pawns. To execute this macabre plan, Daphne Wright preyed upon another layer of societal vulnerability. She enlisted 49-year-old Bobby Guillory, a man struggling with homelessness and severe poverty, offering him $10,000. Bobby, in turn, brought along his 16-year-old nephew, Willie. On the morning of June 10, 2012, the tragedy was set into motion. The perpetrators entered the apartment and waited. When Long and Hong returned from a joyful family birthday celebration, they were ambushed in their own sanctuary. The crime scene was deliberately staged to look like a random act of gang violence, complete with scattered belongings and a strategically placed colored bandana. The elderly couple was cruelly bound and suffered fatal injuries, their lives extinguished in a place that should have been their safe haven. For years, the stage scene confounded seasoned homicide investigators. It was not until the year 2015, when Willie, now an adult, committed a separate offense, that his genetic material was entered into a national database. This evidence matched a discarded marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene. Unraveling the entire conspiracy, A somber reflection on justice and human nature. The wheels of justice turn slowly and often leave a bitter aftermath. In September of the year 2019, a jury sentenced Daphne Wright to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also face the severe consequences of their actions. Yet, the resolution remains fractured. To secure the conviction against the mastermind, prosecutors were forced to offer Chow Tran immunity in exchange for his testimony. The man who unlocked the door to his family's demise walked away, his pockets lined with the insurance money, untouchable by the law. As we reflect on this harrowing sequence of events, we are reminded of why society must prioritize the spiritual and communal well-being of its people over the relentless pursuit of wealth. The tragedy in Texas is a dark mirror reflecting the absolute worst of human avarice. It reinforces our belief that true peace is found in knowing when we have enough, in cherishing our loved ones above all material gain, and in maintaining a steadfast grip on reason when the storms of life threaten to overwhelm us. The memories of Long, Nguyen, and Hong Lee deserve to be honored not through the lens of brutality they suffered, but as a solemn reminder of the enduring need for empathy, integrity, and the protective embrace of a grounded community. Humans are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could possibly imagine, and they often think they are absolute geniuses while doing it. When a person closes a door at night, nobody knows what goes on inside. But blood has a voice, and a crime scene is a very bad liar. Let me tell you about a 37-year-old man named Bernie James. Born in the summer of 1949, Bernie was a good man. He was a Marine who served 2 tours in the jungles of Vietnam. He came back home, became a firefighter, a paramedic, and eventually a park ranger. He spent his entire life protecting people and preserving life. He met his first wife, Lisa, on a medical call. They had a beautiful magnetic attraction and brought 3 children into this world in just 3 years. Life was good until tragedy struck. An aneurysm took Lisa away just before Christmas of 1980. Bernie was left broken, a single father drowning in grief, desperately trying to keep his 3 toddlers afloat. He had a massive heart, and I tell you, that heart became his absolute greatest vulnerability. Enter a woman named Patty. She had a deep surgical scar on her face from a childhood tumor. She convinced herself that the world found her hideous, that nobody would ever love her. But Bernie did not see that scar. He saw a companion. He saw a mother for his children. He married her in 1982, and she legally adopted his kids. But Patty was not a savior. Her physical scar was absolutely nothing compared to the ugly, bottomless void inside her soul. She was a master manipulator, a grifter who even faked her own child being deaf just to steal money from local churches. She isolated those children from the world. She kept Bernie away from his own parents. She was a parasite, feeding on the goodness of a man who just wanted his family to be whole. By the spring of 1987, they were living in the quiet bedroom community of Wilton Manors, Florida. Bernie had finally opened his eyes to the monster in his house. He was planning to divorce her. Now, a woman like Patty cannot handle rejection. She had already been divorced twice. To her, Bernie leaving meant losing her control and her financial cover. So she decided he had to die. But first, she made sure she was the sole beneficiary of his life insurance policy, completely cutting out his 3 young children. My, the pure greed of some people is truly astounding. On March 24th, 1987, at 9:22 in the evening, a frantic 911 call comes into dispatch. Patty claims she found Bernie unresponsive in his car in their driveway. When officers arrive, the family is performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation on the front lawn. Emergency medical services determine Bernie is already dead. I look at this scene and immediately things do not add up. Bernie has severe blunt force trauma to the right side of his head and ascending ligature marks around his neck. He was attacked from behind and strangled But look at the car. The passenger seat is fully reclined. There's a tiny bit of blood on the center console, but nowhere near enough blood volume for a catastrophic head wound. You cannot swing a weapon inside a compact vehicle and generate that kind of lethal force. It is physically impossible. You have to be kidding me if you think this murder happened in that car. Then we look at the supposed robbery. His wallet is tossed a few feet away on the grass, rifled through. There is no cash, but his credit cards and identification are still inside. I tell you, a real mugger grabs a wallet and runs down the street. They do not do a casual inventory check on your driveway. And then there is Patty and her ridiculous story. She says Bernie was outside fixing an electrical issue and doing an oil change. She claims she went outside and saw him talking to a tall black man with a French accent asking for matches. 20 minutes later, she finds Bernie dead, but we check the vehicle. The oil dipstick is completely full. No oil change is happening. Patty was lying through her teeth. The entire crime scene was staged, and it was staged poorly by an amateur. We bring her into the police department. We press her. We show her that her story is absolute garbage. Suddenly, the grieving widow changes her tune. She lowers her head and says she knows who killed him. She points the finger at a man named Tim Ott, someone they knew from a local bowling league. She claims Tim was trying to protect her from Bernie and his alleged physical abuse. She weaves this elaborate tale of going to Tim and his apartment, getting locked in the bathroom, hearing the television turn up extremely loud, and coming out to find Tim dragging Bernie to the car. We find Tim Ott, a soft-spoken, supposedly intelligent man. We sit him down and ask him about Patty and Bernie. He looks confused. He says he does not know anyone by those names. We show him photographs. He points at them and says, "Oh, that is Demian Booth. You cannot make this up." Patty had completely fabricated multiple identities. She was pretending to be a made-up flight attendant named TJ over the phone, feeding Tim lies that Bernie, whom she called Booth, was an abusive monster and a child molester. Then Patty played the role of Demi to meet Tim in person and orchestrate the actual murder plot. Tim thought he was a knight in shining armor, saving a damsel in distress. Instead, he was the ultimate pawn for a calculating psychopath. Tim confesses. He admits they lured Bernie to his apartment. Tim hit him with a baseball bat, then strangled him with a piece of wire. He drove Bernie back to his own house in his own car, arranged the scene, and walked away on foot. We go to Tim and his apartment. He said he tried to clean it up, but luminol does not care about your household cleaning skills. The bedroom carpet glowed with blood evidence, perfectly corroborating the blunt force trauma. Patty thought she was smarter than everyone else. She thought she could pull the strings, play the victim, and walk away rich and unburdened. But arrogance breeds stupidity. Tim Ott took a plea deal for second-degree murder to testify against her, after mistrial caused by one stubborn juror who refused to look at the facts. The second jury saw Patty for exactly what she was. They convicted her of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to spend the rest of her natural life in a concrete box. Bernie James survived the horrors of war only to be slaughtered by the very woman he trusted to raise his motherless children. If the word evil could ever be applied to a human being, it belongs to Patty. She had no conscience, no compassion, and absolutely no remorse. She shattered a loving family just to protect her own fragile ego and line her pockets. I have looked into the eyes of a lot of killers in my career. Most are driven by fleeting rage or sheer desperation. But Patty was a cold, empty void. She is exactly where she belongs, and society is far safer with her locked away in the dark. Humans are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine, and they always think they are smarter than the police. I tell you, they never are. Take a drive down Interstate 44 into Franklin County, Missouri. It is a quiet place, just farmland and woods, where people mind their own business. But the devil does not care about city limits. On the night of October 22, 1992, a motorist spotted a fire in a remote field near Stanton. Firefighters put out the blaze and found a truck reduced to its bare frame. In the passenger seat sat a badly burned body. The fire had consumed almost everything, but fire cannot burn away the truth. It just makes us look harder. There was a metal rod in the right leg of the victim and a vehicle identification number etched into the truck frame. That number led us to Karen and Danny Coleman in St. Louis. Danny was 38 years old. He was a mechanical engineer and an Army veteran whose service was cut short by a motorcycle accident, which explained the metal pin. He was a good man, a father to an 18. The conviction required Willie, who had now reached adulthood, to submit his genetic sample to the state database. When his genetic profile was uploaded into the National Combined DNA Index System, the system instantly flagged a match. The genetic material recovered from the partially smoked marijuana cigarette left on the coffee table in Arlington 3 years prior belonged to Willie Guillory. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old. Because he was a minor with no prior felony convictions, his genetic profile had remained entirely absent from the system until his arrest in 2015. On October 17, 2015, officers located Willie Guillory and brought him to the Arlington Police Department. Initially, they did not charge him with the homicides, choosing instead to hold him on a parole violation to see how he would respond to questioning. During the interview, the detective slowly laid out the evidence, explaining the precision of modern forensic science and how his unique genetic signature had been found inside the quiet apartment where the elderly couple had lost their lives. Faced with the reality of the science, the young man's composure crumbled. He began to weep, confessing his presence at the scene, but insisting that he had not acted alone. Willie explained that in the summer of 2012, he had been a teenager living under the influence of his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. His uncle had approached him, stating that they needed to travel up to Arlington to perform a job, and Willie, feeling he had little choice, had agreed to accompany him. On June 9, 2012, the uncle and nephew made the 3-hour drive from Houston to Arlington. Willie revealed that they did not need to force their way into the apartment because his uncle had been given a physical key to the front door. The plan, according to Willie, was to make the scene look as though local gang members had broken in. They brought along the items to stage the scene: the beer bottles, the light blue bandana, the crushed pills, and the marijuana. While waiting inside the apartment for the couple to return, Willie had smoked a portion of the marijuana cigarette, entirely unaware that the simple act would leave behind the exact clue that would lead to his arrest. Years later, when Long and Hong finally arrived home and stepped through the door, the intrusion turned violent. Willie ran forward to prevent Hong from screaming or escaping, while his uncle, Bobby, confronted Long, striking him with a heavy object to quickly subdue him. Once the elderly couple was incapacitated, the two men bound them with the duct tape and moved them into the small bedroom closet before fleeing back to Houston. When the detectives asked why they had targeted an elderly couple they did not even know, Willie revealed that the entire event was a paid arrangement, organized by a prominent woman in Houston named Daphne Wright, who was a close associate of his uncle. Willie explained that Daphne had been furious because people owed her a significant amount of money, and she had told his uncle that if they did not pay what was owed, she wanted them dead. Armed with this critical confession, the detectives immediately set out to locate Bobby Guillory and investigate the background of Daphne. Right. They discovered that Daphne operated a highly sought-after spiritual advisory service in the Houston area. She was a well-known figure within her community, offering ceremonies, blessings, and advice to business owners seeking to improve their fortunes. Her home life was structured and orderly. She was married to a quiet, supportive husband named Howard, and they had 3 daughters. To those who knew her superficially, she appeared to be a successful, community-oriented professional. When detectives first reached out to Chow Tran to ask if he was familiar with Daphne Wright, his reaction immediately raised their suspicions. Rather than answering their questions directly as he had done in the past, Chow instructed the investigators to communicate solely through his newly retained legal counsel. On December 16, 2015, the investigation moved to Katy, Texas, where officers arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory on 2 counts of capital murder. Initially, Bobby remained silent, but when faced with a search warrant for his own genetic profile, he realized the strength of the case against him and chose to speak. Bobby wept as he spoke to the investigators, expressing fear and regret for his actions. He confirmed that he had never been in trouble with the law before this incident. He explained that in 2011, he had lost his job and was facing severe financial distress, struggling just to find enough food and stay off the streets. During this vulnerable period, he had been introduced to Daphne Wright. Daphne, recognizing his desperation, had offered him $10,000 to travel to Arlington and carry out the deed. According to Bobby, Daphne operated not just as a spiritual advisor, but as a spiritual lender, allowing clients to run up large tabs for her rituals and blessings. Over the years, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Le, had accumulated a debt to Daphne that had ballooned to between $250,000 and $280,000. When Daphne demanded payment, the family was unable to produce the funds. Knowing that the family held substantial life insurance policies, Daphne had proposed a dark solution. If the elderly couple were to pass away, the resulting insurance payout would provide more than enough funds to settle the entire debt. Bobby claimed that Daphne had managed every detail of the plan, and that she had obtained a physical key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. With this evidence, the detectives arrested Daphne Wright at her Houston home. A thorough search of her residence revealed a detailed ledger containing the names of numerous clients and the extraordinary fees she charged for her spiritual services, with some entries listing individual charges of $30,000 and $40,000. When interviewed, Daphne's husband, Howard, maintained his absolute shock and innocence, stating he had no knowledge of his wife's business debts or the events in Arlington. Daphne herself remained cold and reserved, refusing to make any statements without her attorney present. To secure a conviction against the primary organizers of the conspiracy, the prosecutors recognized that they needed a complete narrative. In 2015, financial investigations revealed that shortly after receiving the insurance payouts, Chow Tran had purchased a new home, and the commercial sewing business had been permanently closed. Faced with the mounting evidence, Chow's defense team negotiated a resolution. In exchange for his full and truthful testimony against Bobby, Willie, and Daphne, the prosecution offered Chow immunity from prosecution. During his testimony at Daphne's trial in August of 2019, Chow painted a vivid picture of a family caught in a web of fear, believing that the spiritual advisor held absolute power over their lives, their health, and their business. He testified that the pressure to pay the debt had become so overwhelming that his mother-in-law, Hong, had eventually suggested sacrificing her own life so the family could collect the insurance money to pay Daphne. Chow admitted that he had placed the apartment key under the doormat and informed Daphne of its location, knowing that individuals would be sent to the home. The defense attorneys argued strongly that Chow was the true motivator of the scheme, seeking to keep the substantial insurance payout of $850,000 for himself, and that his claims of spiritual control were entirely unproven. In September of 2019, the jury delivered its final verdict. Daphne Wright was found guilty of capital murder and received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory were also held legally responsible for their roles in the tragic events. For the community of Arlington, the long journey toward justice brought a quiet return to peace. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu was honored by those who remembered their kindness, their beautiful sewing, and the warmth they brought to everyone they met. though the path to the truth had been long and filled with unexpected turns. The light of justice had finally dispelled the shadows, leaving behind a community united in the hope that such gentleness would always be protected. The morning sun rose over the quiet suburban streets of Arlington, Texas, casting a warm, golden glow across the manicured lawns and the red brick apartments of the neighborhood. It was the 10th of June in the year 2012, a season when the Texas heat was just beginning to settle in, thick and heavy. In this bustling city, home to a vibrant and close-knit Vietnamese community, the day began like any other, filled with the gentle hum of early traffic and the sweet scent of jasmine lingering in the air. Yet, beneath the peaceful surface of this beautiful summer morning, a family was gathering outside one of the quiet residential buildings, their hearts heavy with an inexplicable, growing worry. Chow Tran, a 38-year-old man who had built his life in this new land alongside his family, stood near the entrance, his hands trembling slightly as he held his phone. Beside him, his wife and teenage son watched the closed door of the apartment with anxious eyes. For hours, they had tried to make contact with Chow's elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, but the silence from within was deafening. Unable to shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, Chow had sent his young son to knock on the door. The boy's knocks had gone unanswered. Peering through the side of the building, they noticed that a window to the residence was slightly open, a sight that sent a shiver of unease down their spines. It was entirely unlike the elderly couple to leave their home unsecured or to ignore their family. Terrified of what they might find but desperate for reassurance, Chow dialed the emergency line. At precisely 7:29 in the morning, the police dispatch received the call. Chow's voice, though tinged with panic, was polite as he requested a welfare check on his beloved parents-in-law. He explained to the dispatcher that his father-in-law, Long, was a gentleman in his 70s, and that the family had noticed things at the residence that simply did not look right. Within minutes, a young officer named Weller was dispatched to the scene. Officer Weller was accustomed to the routine nature of welfare checks, but as he pulled up to the apartment complex, he felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Usually, such calls were quiet affairs, but here stood an entire family gathered on the pavement, their faces painted with genuine dread. It was far too early in the day for a typical family gathering, and the sheer tension in the air made the officer realize this was no ordinary morning. Stepping inside the apartment, Officer Weller called out, his voice echoing off the walls. There was no response. The living room was in complete disarray, showing the telltale signs of chaotic disturbance. Books and compact discs were scattered across the floor, furniture was pushed aside, and a strange, heavy silence hung over the space. Weller moved carefully through the kitchen and the bathroom, finding them empty. The only remaining room was the master bedroom. Weller entered the bedroom, his flashlight cutting through the dimness. At first glance, the room appeared empty, and for a fleeting moment, a sense of relief washed over him. He reasoned that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to enjoy the cool breeze. He turned to leave, but as he did, his flashlight caught something unusual on the wall next to a very small closet. There were faint, dark hand smudges on the plaster, as if someone had reached out to steady themselves in a moment of great struggle. A deep instinct, honed over years of service, told Weller to pause. Every fiber of his being hesitated, a sudden whisper of caution urging him to walk away. But his duty was clear. He stepped toward the small closet and pulled the door open. Inside the cramped space lay Long and Hong. The sight was devastating. The sweet, gentle couple who had spent their lives building a sanctuary of love for their children were gone. Their journey cut short in a manner that shook the experienced officer to his core. In that quiet closet, the tragic reality of their passing became clear. Weller, feeling a wave of shock, stepped back into the living room. It took him a long moment to regain his voice, to steady his breathing, and to call for his supervisors and the dedicated homicide team. When the seasoned detectives arrived, led by Detective Stewart, a veteran with 21 years of experience in investigating the city's most difficult cases, they found themselves standing in one of the most heart-wrenching scenes they had ever encountered. The apartment bore the marks of a struggle, with smudges on the walls suggesting the victims had tried to hold onto their home as they were led away. The initial theory pointed toward a robbery gone terribly wrong, but the sheer effort put into ensuring the couple could not call for help suggested something far more personal. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000. They were part of a proud wave of families who had brought their rich heritage, their deep values of hard work, and their absolute devotion to their children to the heart of Texas. In Arlington, they found a welcoming community where old traditions blended beautifully with new opportunities. Together with their 3 children, they established a commercial sewing business, hoping to build a lasting legacy. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore sweet fruit. Chow, who spoke fluent English, became the bright, friendly face of the business, coordinating with contractors and building a stellar reputation. Their dedication was rewarded when they secured a highly prestigious contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, bringing joy and prosperity to the entire household. They were a prominent, respected family, known for their generosity and their warm smiles. However, by the year 2011, the winds of fortune had shifted. The major contract ended, and the sewing business began to face severe financial strain. In their culture, when hard work and modern efforts seemed to fail, it was not uncommon to look toward the spiritual world for guidance and comfort. For generations, many believed that a string of bad luck could be the result of spiritual disharmony, and that a wise spiritual advisor could help restore balance, peace, and prosperity. In their search for hope, Chow and his mother-in-law, Hong, discovered an advertisement in a local Vietnamese newspaper for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, some 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a unique ability to lift heavy curses, heal family rifts, and bring abundant good fortune to those in need. Encouraged by the prospect of saving their beloved family business, Chow made the long drive to Houston for a consultation. Daphne performed elaborate rituals, promising that their worries would soon fade and that the sewing machines would once again hum with prosperity. The family felt a renewed sense of hope, believing that their path was finally being cleared of obstacles. Yet, as the months rolled by, the business did not recover. Instead of stepping back to reassess, the family, driven by a deep, traditional respect for spiritual authority and a growing fear of failure, continued to invest more and more of their dwindling resources into Daphne's rituals. What began as a simple request for help slowly transformed into a heavy burden. Over the course of a year, the spiritual fees ballooned, accumulating into a staggering debt of between $250,000 and $280,000. Daphne, who operated with firm, uncompromising hand, began to demand payment, making it clear that she would not tolerate delay. In the wake of the tragedy, the investigators worked tirelessly to piece together the events. At the scene, they discovered curious items that seemed almost too deliberate. A blue bandana was found wrapped around a bottle, and other items were left in plain sight, seemingly pointing toward the local youth gangs that were known to operate in the area. To a young officer, it might have looked like a clear-cut case of gang extortion. But Detective Stewart was skeptical. The scene felt staged, as if someone had carefully arranged the clues to lead the police away from the truth. The detectives focused their attention on gathering genetic samples and interviewing those close to. The family, Chow Tran, acting as a primary spokesperson, cooperated fully. He detailed the family's movements on the night of the tragedy, explaining that they had all gathered to celebrate Long's birthday, playing card games and sharing a Happy Meal until late in the evening. The alibis of the family members were airtight, and their grief was undeniably real. For 2 long years, despite the best efforts of the Arlington police, the case grew cold. The genetic markers found on a cigarette left at the scene did not match any profiles in the national databases, which typically only held records for adult felony offenders. The investigators refused to close the file, keeping the memory of the sweet elderly couple alive in their hearts, waiting for the single spark that would bring the truth to light. That spark arrived in the autumn of the year 2015. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had been 16 years old at the time of the incident, was arrested for a felony offense involving the theft of a horse in Houston. Because he was now an adult and a convicted felon, his genetic profile was entered into the national database. Within days, the system flagged a perfect match between Willie's genetic code and the evidence recovered from the Arlington apartment 3 years prior. The detectives moved swiftly, apprehending Willie for a parole violation to allow them time to interview him. When confronted with the scientific evidence linking him to the apartment, the young man broke down in tears. He confessed that he had indeed been there, but he insisted he was merely a pawn in a plan orchestrated by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, and the spiritual advisor, Daphne Wright. Willie revealed that on the night of the incident, his uncle had driven them from Houston to Arlington, armed with a key to the apartment. Their instructions were to make the scene look like a gang robbery, utilizing the blue bandana and other items to mislead the police. According to Willie, Daphne had ordered the act because she felt she was owed a massive debt that the family could not pay. Armed with this confession, the detectives arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory at his home in Katy, Texas. Bobby, who had no prior criminal history, was filled with remorse and fear. He admitted his involvement, explaining that he had been desperate, struggling to survive after losing his job, and had agreed to help Daphne in exchange for a promised payment of $10,000. He confirmed that Daphne was a driving force, a woman who ruled her household with absolute authority and would go to any lengths to collect what she believed was hers. But the most shocking revelation came when Bobby explained how they had obtained the key to the apartment. He claimed that Daphne had received the key directly from Chow Tran himself. The investigators were stunned. The journey to bring justice to Long and Hong now led back to the very family they had sought to protect. Chow, realizing the focus had shifted toward him, retained legal counsel and eventually agreed to speak with prosecutors. He painted a picture of a family gripped by an intense, overwhelming fear of Daphne's perceived spiritual powers. He claimed that they believed her capable of placing a devastating curse upon their children if they failed to pay. In his telling, the pressure had become so immense that a tragic plan was formed to use life insurance policies, valued at over $1 million, to satisfy the debt and protect the remaining family members. In the summer of the year 2019, the legal process reached its culmination. Daphne Wright was brought to trial, where the jury heard the complex web of faith, fear, and financial desperation that had led to the loss of 2 beautiful lives. Though Chow Tran received immunity from prosecution in exchange for his vital testimony, the true nature of the events was finally laid bare for all to see. Daphne was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring she could never again exploit the faith of others. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced the consequences of their choices, bringing a sense of closure to a long and painful chapter. The story of Long and Hong remained a poignant reminder of the enduring power of family love, the dangers of allowing fear to cloud one's judgment, and the ultimate triumph of justice. In the end, the community of Arlington remembered the sweet elderly couple not for the tragedy of their departure, but for the warmth, laughter, and beautiful legacy of love they had brought with them across the ocean. The morning sun always rose with a particular kind of promise over flat, expansive landscape of North Texas, in the city of Arlington, a place where modern suburbs blended seamlessly with bustling commercial districts. The day began with a familiar hum of traffic and the distant murmur of life unfolding. for the large and vibrant Vietnamese immigrant community that had made this region their home since the late 1970s. The city was more than just a geographic coordinate. It was a sanctuary of hope, a canvas where families painted their aspirations with the colors of hard work, dedication, and deep cultural heritage. At the heart of this community were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu, when they made the monumental decision to pack up their lives and leave Vietnam in the year 2000. They were not merely changing their address. They were carrying a legacy across the ocean. With 3 children and a quiet determination, they arrived in Arlington to pursue the classic American dream. They were a sweet, generous, and exceptionally hard-working couple. Everyone who crossed their path loved them, and they lived their lives without making a single enemy. To establish a foundation for their children and grandchildren, Long and Hong started a commercial sewing business. It was a true family endeavor. They enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old immigrant who possessed a strong command of the English language. Because of his communication skills, Chow became the public face of the enterprise, dealing directly with contractors, negotiating deals, and managing day-to-day operations. For nearly a decade, the sewing business thrived. The family reached the pinnacle of their success when they secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global commercial giant, producing items for none other than the Disney brand. It seemed as though their hard work had finally paid off, cementing their status as a prominent and respected family in the local community. Chapter 2: The Shadow of Misfortune. However, the tides of commerce are notoriously fickle. By the year 2011, the family's spectacular run of good fortune began to slip away. They lost their prestigious contract with Disney, and the sewing machines that once hummed with endless productivity began to fall silent. Financial strain settled over the household like a heavy fog. In traditional Vietnamese culture, when a family encounters a sudden and severe string of bad luck, it is not uncommon to seek explanations that transcend the physical world. For thousands of years, many have believed in spiritual protections, lucky deities, and the delicate balance of cosmic energy. When business takes a sharp downturn or when personal crises loom, families sometimes turn to spiritual advisors to perform rituals meant to lift curses, restore harmony, and welcome prosperity back into the home. Hoping to find a solution to their escalating business troubles, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, began searching for a spiritual guide in the pages of a local Vietnamese newspaper. They came across an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located some 250 miles away in the city of Houston. Her name was Daphne Wright. Daphne advertised herself as a powerful spiritual healer who could remove dark curses, bestow blessings of good fortune, and even apply spiritual countermeasures if necessary. Desperate to save the family business from bankruptcy, Hong encouraged Chow to make contact. Chow reached out to Daphne, who agreed to meet him at her home in Houston for a formal consultation. During that initial meeting, Daphne performed an elaborate ritual designed to turn their financial fortunes around. Chow and Hong returned to Arlington filled with renewed optimism, convinced that their worries would soon be a thing of the past. But spiritual intervention on credit is a dangerous path. Instead of ushering in a new era of prosperity, the connection with Daphne would slowly drag the family into an inescapable web of debt and manipulation. Chapter 3: The Dawn of a Tragedy. On the morning of June 10, 2012, the early silence of Arlington was shattered by a frantic phone call to emergency dispatchers. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, Chow Tran called the police department, his voice trembling as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. He explained to the dispatcher that his teenage son and his wife had gone to the apartment to check on them, only to find the residence in complete disarray through an open window. A dedicated police officer named Weller was quickly dispatched to the suburban apartment complex. Upon his arrival, he immediately noticed that this was not a typical welfare check. An entire family was gathered outside the apartment, their faces pale with anxiety, too terrified to step inside. Officer Weller entered the apartment alone, his flashlight cutting through the dim interior. The living room was in complete chaos, showing all the classic signs of a burglary. Belongings were scattered, furniture was overturned, and compact discs were strewn across the floor. Officer Weller called out, but there was no response. He systematically checked the kitchen, the bathroom, and finally the bedroom. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty. Relieved, the officer turned to leave, believing the elderly couple might have simply gone out for an early morning walk. But as he reached the doorway, his flashlight caught something unusual on the wall next to a small closet. There were faint, dark hand smudges on plaster. Trusting his professional instincts, Officer Weller slowly turned back and approached the closet. He opened the door, and the scene that greeted him was one of absolute horror. Long and Hong were inside, their bodies bound tightly with heavy duct tape. Chapter 4, The Silent Investigation. The responding homicide detectives, including seasoned veterans with over 2 decades of experience, were deeply shaken by the sheer cruelty of the scene. The physical evidence left behind suggested a chaotic struggle near the front entrance, with traces of blood marking the carpet, the couch, the table, and the walls. Yet, as the crime scene investigators meticulously processed the apartment, several details began to strike them as highly unusual. Resting on the coffee table was a plate of crushed prescription pills, arranged as if prepared for consumption, along with a discarded marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped carefully around a beer bottle, left in plain sight. Initially, detectives theorized that this might be the work of one of the active Vietnamese street gangs known to operate in the region. The light blue bandana was a known color associated with local groups, almost serving as a calling card to claim responsibility. However, experienced investigators quickly began to question this narrative. The scene felt too perfect, almost staged to lead the police down a specific path. As the investigation got underway, detectives focused on gathering background information from family. Chow Tran, acting as the primary English-speaking spokesperson, explained that the entire family had gathered the previous evening to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. According to Chow, the elderly couple had a wonderful time, staying until 10:30 in the evening before receiving a ride home from another family member. That was the last time they were seen alive. When asked about potential valuables, Chow mentioned that while Vietnamese families often kept cash at home due to a traditional distrust of banking institutions, his in-laws did not possess any significant wealth. He painted a picture of a humble, hard-working couple whose only struggle was a failing sewing business. Chapter 5, The Autopsy and the Policy. On June 11, 2012, the detectives attended the autopsy at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The medical findings were deeply unsettling. While the victims had sustained blunt force trauma to the head, the true cause of death was suffocation caused by the extensive layers of duct tape wrapped tightly around their faces. The cruelty of the act made it clear to investigators that this was not a simple robbery gone wrong. The primary intent of the perpetrators was to ensure the victims did not survive. The theory of a random gang attack began to fade, replaced by the chilling realization that this crime was deeply personal. A major breakthrough occurred when Detective Stewart received an unexpected phone call from an insurance representative. Routine protocols required insurance companies to notify law enforcement when a claim was made on a substantial policy following a homicide. In this case, the life insurance policy on the elderly couple was valued at a staggering $1 million. When detectives inquired about the beneficiaries of the substantial sum, one name stood out clearly. Primary beneficiary, Chow Tran. Armed with this critical piece of information, detectives invited Chow back to the police station on June 13, 2012. Chow explained that because the sewing business was registered in his in-laws' names, the policy was established to ensure the family could sustain the business if either parent passed away. Chow and the other family members provided consistent alibis for the night of the murders, stating they had stayed together playing cards until late into the night. Detectives collected genetic samples and fingerprints from everyone involved, hoping to find a match with the physical evidence collected from the apartment, particularly the discarded marijuana cigarette. However, when the laboratory results returned, the genetic profile from the cigarette did not match any family members, nor did it match any existing profiles in the national database. Because the database primarily contains profiles of adult convicted felons, the investigation hit a difficult wall. For over 2 years, the case remained cold, leaving the family and the community waiting for answers. Chapter 6: The Stolen Horse and the Broken Silence. The turning point in the cold case arrived in the autumn of the year 2015, through an incredibly unusual sequence of events. A young man named Willie Guillory, who was 16 years old at the time of the murders, was arrested and convicted of felony for stealing a horse in the state of Texas. Because a felony conviction requires an individual's genetic profile to be entered into the national database, Willie's biological markers were finally uploaded within weeks. The system identified an exact match between Willie Guillory and the genetic material recovered from the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene 3 years prior. On October 17, 2015, detectives apprehended Willie Guillory. When presented with the undeniable scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment, the young man broke down in tears and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. Willie explained that on June 9, 2012, his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory, had recruited him to help with a task in Arlington. Bobby had obtained a key to the apartment, allowing them to enter unchallenged and stage the scene to look like a gang-related burglary. They brought the blue bandana, the beer bottle, the pills, and the marijuana to deliberately mislead the police. When the elderly couple returned home, a violent struggle ensued. Willie admitted to helping his uncle restrain the victims and transport them to the closet, where they were bound with duct tape and abandoned. When asked why they had targeted an innocent elderly couple, Willie delivered an explosive revelation. The entire operation was a murder-for-hire plot. The plot was orchestrated by his uncle's associate, Daphne Wright. Daphne had claimed that the couple owed her a massive debt and wanted them eliminated. Chapter 7: The Mastermind and the Ledger. Following Willie's confession, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, on December 16, 2015, to arrest Bobby Guillory. Confronted with his nephew's statement and the threat of capital murder charges, Bobby also confessed. He expressed deep regret, claiming he was desperate for money after being laid off and had agreed to carry out the deed for a promised payment of $10,000 from Daphne Wright. Bobby described Daphne as a spiritual loan shark. Over the course of a year, as Chow Tran and Hong continued to purchase her spiritual services on credit, their debt ballooned to an astronomical sum between $250,000 and $280,000. When Daphne demanded payment, the family could not produce the funds, knowing that Chow and his wife stood to inherit a massive life insurance payout. Daphne allegedly devised a plan to eliminate the elderly couple so the debt could be settled using the insurance proceeds. Most shocking of all, Bobby claimed that the key to the apartment had been provided directly by Chow Tran. Detectives focused their efforts on Daphne Wright, executing an arrest warrant at her Houston home. A thorough search of her residence revealed detailed business ledgers. These documents expose a highly lucrative operation where Daphne charged desperate clients tens of thousands of dollars for spiritual interventions, curse removals, and blessings. Chapter 8: The Deal and the Verdict. As the legal proceedings took shape, prosecutors faced a complex challenge. To secure a conviction against the mastermind, Daphne Wright, they needed direct testimony linking her to conspiracy. Consequently, they made a controversial decision to offer Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and truthful testimony. During his deposition and subsequent trial testimony in August of the year 2019, Chow presented a narrative of intense spiritual manipulation. He claimed that Daphne exerted complete psychological control over his mind and body, leaving him terrified of the spiritual curses she might inflict on his family if the debt went unpaid. In a bizarre turn of events, Chow even claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had willingly offered herself as a sacrifice to secure the insurance money and save the family from Daphne's wrath, a claim that investigators and prosecutors found highly implausible. The defense countered that Chow was a willing participant motivated solely by the $850,000 that ultimately ended up in his personal possession. Despite the controversies surrounding Chow's immunity, the jury focused on the overwhelming evidence against the coordinators of the violence. In September the year 2019, the trial reached its conclusion. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory were also held accountable for their direct roles in the tragedy, while the primary architects of the crime were brought to justice. The resolution left many with a reflective sense of the complexities of human nature. The story of Arlington remains a powerful, sobering reminder of the dangers of greed, the vulnerability of those facing desperate times, and the enduring strength of community that continues to honor the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, usually brought with it a sense of quiet promise, the kind of gentle warmth that made the wide streets and neatly lined apartment complexes feel like safe havens of the American dream. For decades, families from all corners of the world had arrived here, seeking a fresh canvas upon which to paint their futures. Among them was a vibrant and close-knit community of Vietnamese immigrants, many of whom had carried their heritage, their hopes, and their families across the oceans after the fall of Saigon in 1975. They had studied the landscape, worked with tireless dedication, and built businesses that tied them closely to the heart of Tarrant County. Among these striving families were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lee, when they immigrated to the United States of America in the year 2000. They did not just bring suitcases, they brought generations of traditions, a profound respect for their ancestry, and a deep-seated desire to create a lasting legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren. They were gentle souls, known throughout the neighborhood for their quiet generosity and warm smiles. Together with their son-in-law, a bright and articulate 38-year-old man named Chow Tran, they established a commercial sewing business. Because Chow spoke the most fluent English, he became the public face of the enterprise, navigating contracts, speaking with distributors, and managing the day-to-day operations while the family worked tirelessly behind the scenes. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore magnificent fruit. The family secured lucrative contracts with major commercial giants, including producing garments for well-known entertainment empires like Disney. It seemed as though their hard work had finally paid off, securing their place in their new homeland. But by the year 2011, the winds of fortune began to shift. The vital contracts faded, the orders slowed to a trickle, and the business began a steep and frightening decline. Facing the threat of financial ruin, the family felt a growing sense of desperation. In accordance with ancient traditions from their homeland, they began to wonder if a spiritual cloud or a curse had settled over their endeavors. For generations, their culture believed in spiritual forces, in the power of blessings, and in the guidance of spiritual advisors who could lift heavy burdens when a household faced bankruptcy, divorce, or legal troubles. It was during this time of vulnerability that Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lee, searched through a local Vietnamese newspaper and discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based 250 miles away in Houston. The woman, Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a rare ability to remove bad curses and bring immense good fortune to those in need. Encouraged by the prospect of saving the family legacy, Chow made contact and drove to Houston for a consultation. At her home, Daphne performed a ritual that filled the family with a renewed sense of hope. They believed that with her spiritual protection, their fortunes would soon turn around. However, the ritual did not bring the prosperity they so desperately sought. Instead, the family found themselves sinking deeper into a financial abyss, pouring more and more money into the advisor's demands. By the summer of 2012, a dark shadow had completely enveloped the family, culminating on the morning of June 10th in a tragedy that would shock the entire community of Arlington. At 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers received an urgent call from Chow Tran. His voice trembled with anxiety as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, explaining that his family had gathered outside the apartment and noticed an open window. Something felt terribly wrong. Too terrified entered the residence themselves. They waited anxiously on the sidewalk for the arrival of the police. Officer Weller was the first to answer the call. Arriving at the scene, he immediately felt a sense of unease. It was unusually early for a welfare check, and the sight of an entire family standing outside the apartment suggested that this was no ordinary situation. He stepped through the front door into a quiet apartment that appeared to be in complete disarray, showing the classic signs of a sudden and chaotic event. The officer called out into the quiet rooms, but his voice was met only with silence. He walked through the living room, checked the kitchen, and peered into the bathroom. Finding no one, finally, he entered the master bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty, and he felt a brief wave of relief, thinking the elderly couple might have simply gone out for an early morning walk. But as he turned to leave, his flashlight beam caught dark hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet. An instinctual hesitation gripped him. Every fiber of his being warned him of what might lie behind the door, yet his duty compelled him to reach out and pull it open. Inside the cramped space lay the bodies of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. The scene was devastatingly brutal, far exceeding the typical aftermath of a burglary. The elderly couple had been bound tightly with silver duct tape, their heads and mouths completely covered. The sheer violence of the attack left Officer Weller in a state of shock. He stepped back into the living room, unable to speak or use his radio for several moments as he processed the horror of the discovery. When he finally regained his composure, he requested immediate assistance from his supervisors and the crime scene unit. When the veteran homicide investigators arrived, they were equally shaken. Detective Stewart, a seasoned investigator with 21 years of experience, remarked that it was one of the most horrific scenes he had ever encountered. The apartment showed signs of a violent struggle, with blood spattered across the carpets, the sofa, the tables, and the walls. The furniture had been ransacked, and music compact discs were scattered across the floor, suggesting a robbery. Yet, the level of violence felt deeply personal and excessive. Among the chaos, the investigators discovered several unusual items that seemed out of place. On the coffee table sat a plate of crushed prescription pills, alongside a half-smoked marijuana cigarette. More suspiciously, a light blue bandana was wrapped neatly around a beer bottle, left on display like a calling card. To the detectives, this appeared to be an attempt to point the blame toward local active Vietnamese gangs known for extorting neighborhood businesses. However, the seasoned detectives remained skeptical. The clues seemed almost too perfect, as if someone had deliberately staged the scene to mimic a gang-related robbery gone wrong. They carefully collected the physical evidence, including the marijuana cigarette for genetic testing, and gathered hair fibers and fingerprints from the duct tape, hoping to find a clear path to the truth. The investigators next turned their attention to the family, seeking to understand who would want to harm such a gentle and well-liked couple. Chow Tran, as the primary English speaker, became the main source of information. He explained that the entire family had been celebrating his father-in-law's birthday the previous evening. According to Chow, the elderly couple had enjoyed themselves immensely, staying until 10:30 before receiving a ride home from another family member. That was the last time they were seen alive. Chow mentioned that while Vietnamese families occasionally kept cash at home out of a traditional distrust of formal banking institutions, his in-laws had very little money left due to the struggles of their sewing business. He expressed complete bewilderment as to who could have committed such a heinous act, insisting that the couple had no known enemies. On June 11, 2012, the medical examiner's office conducted the autopsies. The reports revealed that while the couple had suffered blunt force trauma to their heads from an unknown object, their actual cause of death was suffocation. Their faces had been wrapped tightly with multiple feet of duct tape, 25 feet for Hong and 10 feet for Long. The realization of the immense pain and terror the victims must have experienced filled the detectives with a renewed determination to bring the killers to justice. As the investigation continued, a sudden phone call from an insurance company shifted the focus of the case. The representative revealed that the deceased couple carried a substantial life insurance policy, worth at least $1 million, and one of the primary beneficiaries was none other than Chow Tran. On June 13th, the detectives interviewed Chow again, asking about the sizable policy. Chow explained that because the business was registered in his in-laws' names, the policy was intended to ensure the survival of the family enterprise in the event of a tragedy. When questioned about his whereabouts on the night of the murders, Chow and his family provided a seemingly airtight alibi, explaining they had stayed together playing cards until after 10 o'clock in the evening. The detectives collected genetic samples and fingerprints from Chow and the other family members, comparing them to the evidence found at the apartment. To their disappointment, the genetic profile retrieved from a marijuana cigarette did not match anyone in the family, nor did it match any existing profiles in the National Criminal Database. The investigators questioned over 50 people, including neighbors and business associates. But every lead seemed to dissolve into a dead end. For over 2 years, the case grew cold, leaving the community in a state of unresolved grief. Then, in October of 2015, a sudden breakthrough breathed new life into the investigation. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston for felony of stealing a horse. Because he had committed a felony as an adult, his genetic profile was entered into the state database for the first time. The system immediately flagged a perfect match between his genetic material and a half-smoked marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene 3 years prior. At the time of the murders, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had not previously appeared in the system. On October 17, 2015, detectives brought Willie in for questioning. When faced with the undeniable scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment, the young man broke down in tears and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. He explained that in June of 2012, his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had enlisted his help for a job in Arlington. They had driven 3 hours from Houston, armed with a key to the apartment and a specific plan to stage a robbery. Willie described how they had scattered items, left the blue bandana, the pills, and the beer bottle to make the crime look like the work of local street gangs. He admitted that when the elderly couple returned home, he had rushed to secure the woman, while his uncle attacked a man with a blunt object. They then bound the couple with duct tape, moved them into the closet, and fled back to Houston. When asked why they had targeted the gentle couple, Willie revealed a shocking truth. It was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by a close associate of his uncle, a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright. According to Willie, Daphne had claimed the couple owed her a massive debt, and she had declared that if they did not pay, she wanted them dead. Armed with this revelation, the investigators focused their efforts on locating Bobby Guillory and building a profile of Daphne. Wright They discovered that Daphne's spiritual practice in Houston had become immensely popular, drawing in clients who paid tens of thousands of dollars for her services. When detectives tried to contact Chow Tran to ask about a connection to Daphne, Chow immediately directed them to his attorney, raising deep suspicions that he was aware the police were closing in on the spiritual advisor. On December 16, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, and arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the evidence and confession of his nephew, Bobby also confessed. He expressed deep remorse, claiming he had been desperately poor and unemployed at the time, and that Daphne had promised him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby explained that Daphne acted as a spiritual loan shark. Chow Tran and Hong Lee had run up an astronomical debt with her, which had ballooned to between $250,000 and $280,000 on credit. When Daphne demanded payment, the family could not produce the funds. Knowing that Chow and his wife stood to inherit a massive life insurance payout, Daphne allegedly devised a plan to eliminate the elderly couple so the debt could be settled using the insurance proceeds. Most shocking of all, Bobby claimed that the key to the apartment had been provided by Chow Tran himself. In August of 2016, detectives arrested Daphne right at her Houston home. A search of her residence uncovered detailed financial ledgers showing that she regularly charged clients up to $40,000 for spiritual interventions, including the placing and lifting of curses, while her husband maintained her innocence. Daphne refused to speak to investigators without her attorney present. To secure their case against the mastermind, prosecutors made a controversial decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and honest testimony against Daphne, Bobby, and Willie. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand and painted a vivid picture of Daphne as a manipulative and greedy figure who exerted a powerful psychological hold over his family. He claimed they were terrified of her spiritual powers and believed she could place a devastating curse on them if they failed to pay. In a startling claim, Chow even asserted that his mother-in-law had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay the debt. The defense strongly challenged Chow's credibility, arguing that he was a true driver of the plot, motivated by the $850,000 payout that ultimately landed in his pocket. They pointed out the complete lack of physical documentation regarding the alleged debt. Nevertheless, Chow's testimony provided the critical link the prosecution needed. In September of 2019, the jury delivered its verdict. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the tragedy. Although the investigators felt a deep sense of relief that the perpetrators had been brought to justice, the fact that Chow Tran remained free under the immunity agreement left a lingering shadow. Yet, as they look back on the long journey from that quiet, tragic morning in 2012, they found solace in the knowledge that the truth had finally been brought to light, honoring the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee, and reminding the community that even the darkest secrets eventually find their way into the warmth of the sun. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, did not merely rise. It spilled across the horizon like warm honey, gilding the rooftops of the quiet residential neighborhoods in a gentle amber glow. It was late spring, a time when the Texas breeze still carried the sweet, lingering scent of bluebonnets and damp earth before the fierce heat of summer claimed the landscape. In a neat, modest apartment complex nestled within a vibrant Vietnamese community, the day began not with a rush of alarms, but with the soft, rhythmic hum of a sewing machine and the quiet rustle of steam rising from a hot kettle. This was the home of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, a devoted couple who had walked the long, winding path of life hand in hand for nearly 5 decades. When they immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, they carried with them very little in the way of material wealth. Their suitcases were packed with hand-stitched garments, cherished family photographs, and a few jars of traditional spices. But what they lacked in baggage, they more than made up for in hope, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to the American dream. Long Gwyn, a man of 73 years with gentle silver hair and eyes that crinkled into warm crescents, whenever he smiled, was a master tailor back in their homeland. His hands had shaped fine silks and sturdy cottons for generations of families, earning him a reputation for perfection and grace. Beside him was his wife, Hong Lu, a woman of 68 whose quiet strength was a true anchor of their family. She possessed an innate ability to make anyone feel at home, her kitchen always filled with the rich, savory aroma of beef broth simmering with star anise, cinnamon, and cloves. For Long and Hong, the move to Texas was not just a change of address. It was a grand adventure dedicated to the future of their 3 children and grandchildren. They saw in the wide Texas sky a blank canvas upon which they could sketch a legacy of hard work, love, and community. Within a few years of their arrival, they established a small commercial sewing business. It was a modest operation run out of a small warehouse space, but it was fueled by absolute dedication. To bridge the gap between their traditional craft and the fast-paced American business world, they enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow, a charismatic 38-year-old who spoke fluent, confident English, became the public face of the enterprise, while Long and Hong worked tirelessly behind the scenes, guiding the fabric under the rhythmic needles of the industrial sewing machines. Chow negotiated contracts, met with suppliers, and managed the logistics. He was the bridge between their heritage and their future. For a long time, the arrangement was a beautiful success. The business grew steadily, fueled by the family's reputation for impeccable quality and honest dealings. Their crowning achievement came when they secured a lucrative contract to produce specialty garments for a major commercial giant, a household name recognized across the globe. For nearly a decade, the sewing business thrived, and the family savored the sweet fruits of their labor. They bought a comfortable family home, gathered for elaborate Sunday dinners, and watched their grandchildren grow up with opportunities they themselves could only have dreamed of in their youth. But life, much like the patterns Long sketched on his workbench, is rarely a straight line. By the year 2011, the winds of fortune began to shift. The massive commercial contract was not renewed, a casualty of global corporate restructuring rather than any fault of their own. Almost overnight, the steady stream of orders slowed to a trickle. The heavy industrial machines, once a chorus of productivity, now sat silent for days at a time. The financial strain began to press down on the family like a heavy, unseen weight, the shadow of the unknown. In times of deep uncertainty, the human heart often reaches backward, seeking comfort in the ancient traditions and spiritual beliefs of its ancestors. For generations, Long and Hong's family had held a deep respect for the spiritual world. In the traditional Vietnamese worldview, success and failure, health and sickness, were not merely matters of luck or effort. They were intimately connected to the alignment of cosmic energies, the favor of ancestral spirits, and the presence of spiritual balance. When a streak of misfortune persisted, it was common practice to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor, someone who could look beyond the physical world, identify any spiritual obstacles or curses, and perform the necessary rituals to restore harmony and prosperity. It was a belief system rooted in a desire for protection, healing, and a return to a peaceful state of existence. As the financial worries deepened, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Le, began to discuss the possibility that their business was suffering from more than just market fluctuations. Perhaps, they whispered, there was a spiritual cloud hovering over them. Chow, wanting desperately to relieve the stress on his elderly in-laws, began searching through the local Vietnamese language newspapers that circulated within the community. In one of the weekly editions, tucked between advertisements for local grocery stores and community events. Chow found a prominent listing for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advertisement was written in bold, confident letters, promising assistance with all of life's difficulties. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a rare ability to identify and lift negative spiritual influences, remove ancient curses, and channel positive energy to bring immediate good fortune and financial recovery to struggling businesses, to a family facing the quiet desperation of a fading dream. The advertisement felt like a beacon of hope. Hong, ever protective of her family's well-being, encouraged Chow to make contact. "We must try everything," Hong had said gently, her voice soft but filled with motherly determination. "If there is a way to bring peace back to our home and protect the work of our lives, we must seek it." Chow agreed. He placed a call to Houston and spoke with Daphne Wright. Her voice over phone was commanding, assured, and deeply persuasive. She spoke with an authority that immediately put Chow at ease, promising him that she understood their plight and knew exactly how to help. She invited Chow to travel to her home in Houston for an initial consultation, assuring him that once she assessed their spiritual landscape, the path to prosperity would be cleared. With a heart full of hope and a desire to bring good news back to his family, Chow made the 3-hour drive south to Houston, embarking on a journey that would forever alter the course of their lives. The meeting in Houston. The city of Houston welcomed Chow with its sprawling highways and bustling energy. He navigated the unfamiliar streets until he arrived at the residential neighborhood where Daphne Wright lived and operated her spiritual practice. The house was structured like many others on the suburban street, but inside, the atmosphere was entirely different. Daphne Wright was a woman of 44 who commanded attention the moment she entered a room. She was direct, highly articulate, and possessed an intense, magnetic personality. She listened intently as Chow explained the family's history, the rapid rise of their sewing business, and the sudden, devastating loss of their major contracts. She nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting a deep, knowing understanding that made Chow feel instantly validated. "The physical world is only a reflection of the spiritual reality," Daphne explained, her voice steady and resonant. "Your business is not failing because of the economy. There's a deep, dark block, a negative energy that has been directed toward your family. Until this is cleared, no amount of hard work will bring success. But do not worry, we can fix this." Daphne performed an initial ritual, burning traditional incense, reciting prayers, and placing symbolic offerings on a beautifully adorned altar. To Chow, who had grown up with a deep respect for these ancient practices, the ritual was deeply comforting. He felt a physical weight lift from his shoulders. He returned to Arlington that evening with a renewed sense of optimism, sharing the details of the meeting with Hong and Long. For a short time, the family felt a surge of hope. They returned to the sewing shop with lighter hearts, believing that the spiritual block had been cleared and that new contracts were just around the corner. But as the weeks turned into months, the material reality of their situation did not change. The bills continued to arrive, the bank accounts continued to dwindle, and the sewing machines remained quiet. Rather than questioning the efficacy of the rituals, the family believed that the spiritual resistance was simply stronger than they had initially realized. When Chow contacted Daphne to report that the business had not yet turned around, her response was unwavering. "These things require time, dedication, and deeper work," Daphne told him. "The negative forces surrounding your family are ancient and stubborn. We must perform stronger, more complex rituals to completely break the cycle." Trusting her completely, and driven by the urgent need to save their business, the family agreed to proceed. What began as a single consultation soon evolved into a continuous series of spiritual interventions, with Daphne directing a variety of rituals designed to shield the family and invite prosperity. the weight of commitment. Over the course of the next year, the relationship between the family and their spiritual advisor grew increasingly complex. Daphne's services were not without cost, and as the rituals became more elaborate and frequent, the financial obligations began to mount. Because the sewing business was no longer generating a steady income, the family began to fall behind on their payments to Daphne, recognizing their financial distress, but insisting that the spiritual work could not be interrupted without risking even greater misfortune. Daphne offered to extend her services on credit. She assured them that once the blessings manifested, they would easily be able to settle their accounts. Chow and Hong, deeply entrenched in the belief that stopping the rituals would invite a complete catastrophe, accepted the arrangement. They viewed the growing debt not as a liability, but as a necessary investment in their eventual recovery. However, the ledger of spiritual services began to grow at an astonishing rate. Each custom ritual, each protective blessing, and each spiritual consultation carried a significant fee, ranging from several thousand to tens of thousands of dollars. Within a year, the total amount owed to Daphne ballooned to an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. For an immigrant family whose business was virtually at a standstill, this was an unimaginable sum of money. The weight of this debt began to overshadow every aspect of their daily lives. Yet, they felt trapped in a delicate paradox. They could not pay the debt without the business succeeding, and they believed the business could not succeed without the very spiritual services that were creating the debt. Throughout this period, Long Nguyen remained largely quiet, focusing his energy on his family and his craft, while Hong and Chow bore the primary emotional weight of managing the relationship with Daphne. They kept their struggles quiet, presenting a brave face to the tight-knit Vietnamese community in Arlington, participating in cultural events, and continuing to support their children and grandchildren with boundless love and affection. A gathering of love. Despite the quiet storm of financial anxiety brewing in the background, the family never allowed their worries to diminish their love for one another. This was never more evident than on the evening of June 9th, 2012. The family gathered at Chow Tran's home to celebrate a deeply significant milestone, Long Nguyen's birthday. It was an evening filled with laughter, warmth, and the simple joys of family life. The dining table was laden with Hong's legendary home-cooked dishes, and the air was alive with the chatter of grandchildren playing and stories being retold. For a few hours, the worries of sewing business and the looming debts were completely forgotten. Long sat at the head of the table, his face glowing in the warm light of the birthday candles. He looked around the room at his children, his daughter-in-law, his son-in-law, and his precious grandchildren, his heart overflowing with gratitude. This, he knew, was a true American dream, not the balance in a bank account, but the laughter of his family gathered together in peace and safety. The celebration continued late into the evening. They played traditional card games, shared sweet desserts, and enjoyed each other's company until well past 10 o'clock. Around 10:30, as the grandchildren began to yawn and the evening drew to a natural close, another family member offered to drive Long and Hong back to their nearby apartment so they wouldn't have to worry about driving late at night. Long and Hong accepted, hugging their children and grandchildren tightly, promising to see them all again the very next day. As the car pulled away from Chow's house, carrying the sweet, elderly couple back to their quiet residence, the family waved from the porch, their hearts full of the warmth of a beautiful celebration. It was the last time Long and Hong would ever be seen alive by those who loved them most. The silent morning. The morning of June 10th, 2012, broke with a quiet, still air. At 7:29 in the morning, the peace of the early hour was broken when emergency dispatchers in Arlington received a phone call from a deeply worried Chow Tran. Chow's voice was strained, filled with an anxiety that he could barely contain. He explained to the dispatcher that he was standing outside his in-laws' apartment complex. He had come by early to check on them, but something was terribly wrong. "Can you give me their names?" the dispatcher asked, her voice calm and professional, designed to soothe the caller's obvious distress. "My dad's name is Long," Chow replied, his voice trembling as he spelled the name. "Last name Wyn. He is 70-something right now. My mother is Hong Lu. We are very worried." Chow explained that he had sent his teenage son up to knock on the apartment door, but there had been no answer. This was highly unusual for the elderly couple, who were early risers and always welcomed family with open arms. As more family members began to arrive at the complex, their concern deepened into a cold, sharp fear. They walked around the exterior of the building and noticed that one of the apartment windows was slightly open. From their position on the ground, things inside did not look right. It appeared as though items had been disturbed, and a heavy, unsettling silence hung over the home. Two terrified entered the apartment themselves, fearing what they might find or what might still be inside. The family huddled together on the manicured lawn of the complex, waiting anxiously for police to arrive. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington Police Department with 14 years of experience, was the first to arrive on the scene. He noted the unusual nature of the call. It was incredibly early for a standard welfare check, and seeing an entire extended family standing outside the residence in a state of visible panic immediately signaled to him that this was no ordinary situation. Approaching the apartment, Officer Weller took a deep breath, drew his flashlight, and knocked loudly on the door, announcing his presence. Hearing nothing but silence from within, he carefully turned the handle. To his surprise, the door was unlocked. Inside the quiet apartment, Officer Weller stepped across the threshold, his senses immediately on high alert. The interior of the apartment was in complete disarray, presenting all the classic, telltale signs of a burglary. "Arlington Police, is anyone home?" Weller called out, his voice echoing in the quiet space. There was no response. He moved cautiously through the living room. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled open, and compact discs were scattered across the floor. He checked the kitchen and the bathroom, finding both empty. The only room left to inspect was the master bedroom. Weller entered the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared quiet, and he did not notice anything that immediately stood out to him. His primary focus was entirely on finding the elderly couple, hoping they had simply stepped out or were perhaps staying with another relative. He began to turn around, preparing to head back to the living room and inform the waiting family that the apartment was empty. But as he turned, his flashlight beam swept across the wall next to a very small closet. There, clear and unmistakable, were dark smudges on the plaster, smudges that looked like handprints, as if someone had desperately clung to the wall. A cold chill ran down Weller's spine. Every instinct built over his 14 years of policing told him to hesitate. A quiet voice inside told him to turn away, but his duty compelled him forward. He reached out, his fingers wrapping around the cold handle of the closet door, and pulled it open. What he saw inside that small, dark space would stay with him for the rest of his life. Tucked inside the closet were Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They were bound hand and foot, hogtied with heavy silver duct tape. Their heads and mouths were entirely enveloped in layers of the same thick tape, and there was blood pooled on the floor and splattered against the walls. In that split second, Officer Weller knew they were gone. The sheer brutality of the scene was overwhelming, a stark and horrific contrast to the peaceful life the sweet couple had lived. Shocked and momentarily speechless, Weller walked slowly out of the bedroom into the middle of the living room. He stood there for a long moment, gathering his thoughts, before finally picking up his radio to request a supervisor in the crime scene unit. The hunt for clues. Within the hour, the quiet apartment complex was transformed into a bustling crime scene. Yellow tape secured the perimeter, and Arlington homicide investigators arrived to begin the meticulous process of uncovering who could have committed such an unspeakable act. Leading the investigation was a team of seasoned detectives, including veterans with over 21 years of experience in homicide. Yet, even they were visibly shaken by the scene. The level of violence directed toward an elderly, defenseless couple was extraordinarily rare and deeply unsettling. Initial examinations indicated that the victims had been subjected to severe blunt force trauma, possibly inflicted with a heavy object like a hammer or a blunt bat, before being placed in the closet. The apartment showed extensive signs of ransacking, suggesting a robbery, but several details did not align with a typical home invasion.